Hi, it's Andy Martins on Civic Affairs. Welcome to the show. And today's show, I've got Mike Delfre. Hey, Mike, how are you?
Hello, Andy.
Director of Operations for Food Security for the United Way. How did we get from the bush plane to food security in the United Way?
Well, it's a bit of a long story, but I'd been at the bush plane for 8 years, and the opportunity to work to build a new organization came up through some discussions with the United Way and some of the other partners, and I felt it was a good time to leave the bush plane. It was in pretty good shape, and it was time for some new energy, new ideas, and new blood there. And this opportunity came open, so I made the leap, and I'm very happy I did. I'm happy to see the bush plane is doing well with their renovations and all, but the chance to build a new organization with the United Way was sort of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So
now, see, people are looking, well, Mike must have had the insight. That's often happens, isn't it, when new opportunities come around? You just don't see them in the paper, advertised in the paper.
Well, I've worked in the community most of my life and have worked in areas like community development and related to things like poverty and unemployment, obviously. So I had a sense that this opportunity that the United Way was creating in food security related to the poverty reduction strategy would really be an opportunity to try to make a difference in the community and use some of the experience, some of the skills I acquired at the bush plane and other places too. So I wanted that opportunity to be able to use my experience to build the kind of capacity that we have and have started to build through the United Way.
For the viewers that don't know, what did you do before the bush plane? A little bit more of your background.
A lot of it was spent in the education fields at Sioux College, in the employment field, at the YMCA and with the federal government. So I've got a background of mostly education and employment. And then when I went into the museum field at the bush plane, it was more into working in the not-for-profit sector and culture. But again, there's such a close tie to the community because museums serve the community and preserve its history.
How the working world has changed, because I worked where I did for 31 years, and that just doesn't happen these days, does it?
Well, I think in a community like ours, I think we've come to a realization now that we have to build on our strengths in the community. We have to start to look at what do we have as assets and opportunities that we can use that are here now, and one of the areas that I've come to understand that has very large growth potential for us is the agricultural sector. The number of farms in the district and the opportunity to add value to the produce, to the products they produce, which therefore means job creation. So processing those manufactured products, distributing them and retailing them. So agriculture, because it's sort of outside the city, hasn't been seen as a growth sector for a long time. And I think that's really the opportunity for us to have a look at that and say, how can we get connected to those farms and those farmers, those producers, and create some jobs in processing and try to keep more of that local food here.
How did the United Way change for our viewers? Because it's certainly changed in the last 5 years or so. I didn't even know that, it's changing to that extent.
Actually, it's even less than that. It's only kind of around 3 years that the United Way went through a revision to its mandate, and instead of being a funding agency for other agencies to provide services, they got into direct delivery of services. So the Food Security Division, our division, we went from zero. By June, we'll have 5 employees funded by the United Way or our partners to deliver programming. And then the United Way office downtown has added employees in the essential services area. So it's been a major shift in the mandate where the United Way is providing services directly to the community as opposed to funding agencies to provide those services.
Oh, okay.
And so they feel, the United Way feels they have a greater impact by being able to provide those services directly particularly with the poverty reduction strategy that was approved for Sault Ste. Marie about 3 years ago when it was created.
Right.
No one was picking up on kind of the bigger issues like poverty and like homelessness. And some of the issues around homelessness. So the District Social Services Board has taken that responsibility and has done a terrific job of adding housing stock and getting more people into affordable housing. And the United Way has taken the food security challenge on.
Now, that reorganization was happening at the time that you were talking to them and you were still at the Bush Plane.
That's correct.
Am I correct? And maybe
Yes.
5-6 years ago that was happening?
Well, no more recent than that. About 2 to 3 years ago, I began looking for, we were talking about creating a social enterprise at the Bush Plane in manufacturing. And it was a way to create jobs for people on social assistance who weren't able to do the kind of jobs that we have in the community, service type jobs and fast food or retail and so on and so forth. And then I heard about the United Way's interest in food security and a food warehouse. And I went to them and said, what do you think about the opportunity of working together and adding a manufacturing social enterprise, but in the area of food rather than in the things that we were looking at, along with their food warehouse. And then what really sort of kick-started the whole division was being able to get access to the former Croatian Hall, where our food resource center is, because apart from the warehouse, the former banquet hall is our warehouse, but they have a large commercial kitchen. And so that meant we can process a lot of food. So now we're also in the food production business. We're installing 2 greenhouses this year, and we'll be growing food along with the food bank farm and the some urban agriculture initiatives that are happening in the community. So food security is an interesting concept that a lot of people kind of either hadn't heard of or don't really understand. And what it really means is that we have control of, or more control of, the food supply in our community and can ensure that the people who need food can get food. And we do that by producing it, obviously, which we have the ability to produce and process. But the other area is we can rescue food. And the laws in Ontario changed last year. So now restaurants and grocery stores are allowed to donate surplus food that previously they would have thrown away.
Right.
So now we have a food rescue coordinator starting work full-time for us in June with a refrigerated vehicle. And we've started to make connections in the restaurants and stores to get surplus food from them.
Okay, Mike, stay right there, and we'll take a quick break, and we'll be back with Mike Delfre right after these commercials.
At 4:45, discover all kinds of treasures and never pay more than $5. Inventory is restocked every Saturday, and you can find anything from electronics to household items, toys, and much, much more. On Saturday, everything is $5 and the price goes down throughout the week, ending with 25 cents on Friday. We restock weekly with new items from various big box stores, so you never know what treasures you can find. Come visit us at 4:45, 2510 Ashman Street in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan.
Welcome to the Machine Shop, our historic venue and gathering place for friends and family. Built in 1899 on the site of a Northwest Company trading post. Today we are a go-to venue hosting many expos, concerts, weddings, and more. While you're here, choose one of our dining experiences. Enjoy a quiet dinner at the Mill Steakhouse and Wine Bar, watch a game and try wood fire oven pizza and local draft at the Boiler Room, or treat yourself every day to gelato and local coffee at the Gelato Mill. For more information on the Machine Shop, visit machineshopinc.ca.
At Mortgage Architects, we offer the Manulife One, which is an all-in-one line of credit, bank account, and mortgage. Pay down your debt as fast as you want and save thousands in interest while maintaining instant access to the equity in your home. To learn more, visit retiremymortgage.ca or contact Pam Jerling at 705-542-4399.
Hi, welcome back to Civic Affairs. I'm Andy Martins, and my guest is Mike Delfre, the Director of Operations for Food Security for the United Way. We're talking about the changes that United Way made 2-3 years ago. Did they feel the community wasn't being served properly in the old design?
I think a better way to kind of say it is that poverty is such a large and complex issue that no one really was putting the kind of critical mass together to bring a lot of the players that can solve the problem, in this case of food security. There are a lot of players in the community. The Food Bank Farm and Connect the Dots are good examples, the Community Garden Network, Algoma Educational Gardening. So all those players were doing their thing, but the impact wasn't nearly as great as the problem was. And so through the poverty reduction strategy, the discussions about that, what could be done differently, the United Way saw an opportunity to say, well, our model of United Way means everybody works together. And so we have some synergy and we have some critical mass. And that's what started to happen now in the last year since we became a division. The players have come together, and we're now starting to share resources. We're starting to do some planning.
Right.
We're doing a better job of knowing what the needs are and then gearing up to be able to meet those needs.
Did the United Way gauge the level of poverty? They knew exactly how bad it is here. What were the numbers that they were telling you in the beginning? That, Mike, we got to go this way.
Well, in food security in particular, in terms of hunger,
right.
The two biggest groups of people who are affected by hunger in the community are children and seniors.
Right.
But in addition to hunger, there's also a nutrition deficit in the community because people are eating either the wrong things, there's a lot of obesity, or there's a lot of diabetes, so people are eating processed food, or they're not eating healthy, don't have access to healthy food. So it's a very complex problem, and because of that, it makes it much more difficult to solve. So when the United Way, through their strategic planning and the dialogue that they had with a lot of agencies like Algoma Public Health and Algoma Family Services, all the expertise in the community said, we have to try something differently. And the group that really led the charge was the Social Services Administration Board, the DSAB. Right? They said, we have food banks, we have soup kitchens, we're meeting the need to a certain level, but the need is bigger and more complex than our current capacity to serve is. So we've got to try something else. And they put out a call for proposals, and the United Way responded to that. And here we are a year later.
Where did the extra funds come from to do this, to get it to the next level?
Initially, they came from the DSAB, right? The District Social Services Admin Board. They saw a need, and they saw an opportunity through the proposal the United Way made. And then since we've been operating now for a year, the United Way has diverted funds from its campaign and is working to increase its campaign now to add capacity to our center. We are looking for other support, and we expect to receive that. And one of the places we expect to see that will be the municipality, will be the city, because it's the city, it's the population that we're trying to serve. So there is a poverty reduction strategy. Council endorsed it. We've gone back to the council and said now we need some resources to be able to implement that strategy.
How bad is the poverty as such? On a scale of 1 to 10 in Sault Ste. Marie, how bad would it be?
Well, depending on who you talk to, the numbers I've seen are that we're looking at somewhere in the range of 8 to 12% of the population are considered living in poverty. The problem with that number is that the people who are on the fringes of that, when you think of people like the working poor, or you think of people who are living on fixed incomes, they have to make choices with the fixed income that they have. In a lot of cases, food becomes an alternative item because they have to pay their rent and they have to pay for their utilities and so forth. So food becomes discretionary, and that means that they're not eating well, they're not eating healthy, and that's affecting them in other ways. So I think the message that people understand is that we pay for poverty in higher healthcare costs and higher productivity costs, even criminal justice costs, because we're not really getting at the root of the problem, and that is getting people who live in poverty back into the community, back into creating the kind of jobs that they can do.
Have you made any headway in the last 2 to 3 years?
What we've made progress with in the community, in particular in food security, say in the last year, is we've started to increase the amount of food that comes into the community from outside, from the Ontario Association of Food Banks, from manufacturers and retailers. Right. Now that we have an adequate facility that we can receive and store food safely, that food is coming to us, whereas previously it would just go through the SOO and miss us. So we've been able to increase the amount of food that's available to food banks, soup kitchens, social service agencies. Starting next month, when we start to rescue food from restaurants and grocery stores, we'll also increase the amount of food, and obviously with greenhouses and
rescue,
gardens.
Can you elaborate on that, what that entails?
Well, if you think of, for example, when you go to a banquet, like a wedding or a conference, right? There's almost always more food that is prepared than is used or is eaten at the event. That difference is called a surplus, and that typically, that food would have been thrown away. It would have been, the law required
Marconi and elsewhere,
everywhere, right? So you were not, once it had been prepared, you could not donate it because there was food safety laws that prevented that. Well, a year ago, the province changed those rules, and now organizations that are registered and have the ability and the equipment to rescue that food, to rescue it from the garbage, essentially, and keep it safe and distribute it either immediately within a time frame or freeze it so that it can be used for later. So that's where we come in as a food rescue agency. We're working on setting up agreements with retailers, with restaurants, with caterers, so that we can pick up that food. We have a dedicated person with a refrigerated vehicle starting in June to be able to get that food and make it available to the people who need it.
I did not know, and that's working well.
It's starting because there are already volunteer groups who have been doing this, but we'll expand it on a significant scale with a dedicated full-time person and the right equipment. So that the amount of food. And the restaurants and the grocery stores are just thrilled to know that they don't like the idea of having to throw, perfectly edible food away. It's just not the right thing to do.
But the government had to change the law.
They did. Yeah.
Let's take another quick break, Mike. We'll be right back, and we'll be back with Mike Delfre after these commercial messages.
This is an ONNtv news break with Luann Young.
The third installment of the Pet Value Walk for Guide Dogs took place on a beautiful Sunday afternoon. The event, which helps raise funds necessary for life-changing service dogs, was well attended with owners and their four-legged friends alike. To own a service dog, you can expect to invest about $25,000. Local men donned red high heels on Saturday morning to raise money for women in crisis during the second annual Walk a Mile in Her Shoes event, and that was at City Hall. The event, which raised just over $46,000, was a way for men and women to walk in honor of someone who's been afflicted by abuse and violence. All funds raised will be used to help women in crisis to continue offering many services to women in need, including an emergency shelter. The Butcher Shop held its grand opening event Saturday afternoon with all food and beer proceeds going to the Algoma Autism Foundation. Meet the Butcher General Manager, Christy Albadone, said she decided to partner up with the AAF because of the recent cuts the Ford government has made to autism services. I'm Luann Young. Thanks for watching ONNtv. Don't forget you can always go for updates to Sue Online.
Hey Mel, did you know in Queensgate, Australia, it's illegal to own a pet rabbit unless you can prove you're a magician?
Really? Did you know that if you're at the McMeekin Arena, you're only 9 minutes and 54 seconds away from Maitland Ford Lincoln?
It's closer than you think.
For coming back to Civic Affairs. We're speaking with Mike Delfre. And Mike, you wanted to talk about some of the programs that are happening with Harvest Algoma and the United Way.
Well, I'll talk about some of the programs we're doing, but there are already a lot of people who are working in hunger relief or poverty or food insecurity. A lot of church groups, a lot of volunteer organizations. There's an organization called Fallen Fruit, and they're a group of volunteers who will come and harvest your fruit tree. If you have an apple tree and you're not using those apples, you can sign up and they'll come and harvest them, and then those apples will come to us.
At no charge.
At no charge.
It's not going to cost the homeowner.
That's right. Or the homeowner can keep a portion and donate a portion, or a program like the Grow a Row. If you have a garden, grow an extra row. The Sault Ste. Marie is really fortunate, really blessed with some of the volunteers in the community, people who work at the food bank farm out on Mackey Road, or people who work for Connect the Dots and Rescue Food. So when we came on board and started to work with those people and saw an opportunity to expand on what they're doing, we have partnerships in the works. One of them is with Ontario Works, and in June we begin a gardener landscape training program to give people skills in gardening and landscaping to try to get a job, but also to work on our own business lines of food production and food manufacturing. We're talking with a group called You Are Not Alone, which is a support group for new mothers or expecting mothers, and we're talking about creating a baby food making club with them, using food that we've grown or food that we've rescued. And this is the way we can get right down on the ground and helping people who have the need, whether it's for food or food production or social interaction. We do some work with the Neighborhood Resource Center. Again, having them connected to us where we can supply food, or they can come up and do community kitchens where people are learning skills like cooking or preserving. So a lot of the skills that used to exist in the community, back in the day, that would make a person food secure. Food security comes if you grow your own food and you cook it and preserve it, then you have food, so you're secure in that way.
And some people do that on their own, but not everybody's able to do that.
That's correct, yeah. They either don't have the skills, or they don't have the capacity. They don't have maybe a kitchen or a freezer. Well, we can help with that now. We have the capacity. We can help them learn those skills. Even if they need some equipment, we can lend it to them until they get just a little bit ahead of the game.
How many calls do you get a day from people in Sault Ste. Marie?
Well, we aren't a public food bank like the Soup Kitchen or Vincent Place or Salvation Army.
It's a different ballgame.
Yeah, our job is to supply those agencies with surplus food beyond the capacity that they have, right? And as well, we have a network of social service agencies like Ken Brown Recovery Home or Pauline's Place or Breton House.
The public still needs to go to St. Vincent's Place and
so
those other places.
That network of distribution was already there. What we've done is brought an additional amount of food to the community to support those agencies.
Oh, okay.
As well as now we'll be adding food
But they still go to food drives and stuff on their own to raise money and to raise food.
Well, that just kind of gives you an indication of the extent of the problem, the scope of the problem, right? Even though we're bringing in, and so far since we opened, we've brought in almost 75,000 pounds of food.
Right.
So that's a lot of additional
And still
food.
The need exceeds the supply.
The need exceeds the supply.
Over and above everything.
We still have a ways to go to get to a level of security, and we expect to do that by growing food and rescuing food. I mean, there's been a lot of food thrown away that will make a big difference in people's diets if we can rescue that.
In our remaining time, let's talk quickly about some of the partners and a big employee group and the food sovereignty. Let's get into the food sovereignty a little bit.
Food sovereignty is going to come from a system where the farmers, the producers have the capacity to process food locally, distribute food locally, and sell it locally. So we have control of that food. Right now, most of the food that comes in the community comes from manufacturers and suppliers outside the community. Large manufacturers in Southern Ontario and elsewhere. Whereas we have a lot of farms and we also have a lot of room for growth in those farms. And if we can start processing the food that's produced locally, that's where the jobs are. And then that food then becomes available through markets or agreements with local suppliers. So almost all grocery stores in the Soo either have some local products or are willing to have more.
Right.
And although those are seasonal products, we want to extend that through a year-round process.
All of this, fast forward 5 years, how do you see the whole landscape in Sault Ste. Marie changing as a result of what you're doing now?
Well, landscape is a really good word. There will be much less hunger in the community, particularly in those marginalized groups, children and youth. This year we have the second year of the Every Breakfast Counts program that we're expanding on. It provides breakfast to kids in the summertime when the schools are closed. We'll be adding a Cooking for Singles programming this fall where single people, whether they're widowers or just young people, will be able to get together in groups using food that we've grown or rescued. So there'll be less hunger in the community. There'll be an increase in the skill sets, cooking, preserving, and gardening. We have a children's teaching garden that Kiwanis is supporting coming on this summer. So I think inside of 3 or 4 years, you'll see a very different landscape related to food, hunger, and eventually as we move forward in poverty reduction. You'll see less poverty.
Are you confident that what you're seeing now, we're going to get there in 4 or 5 years?
Absolutely. I'm completely confident because of what I've seen in just the year that we've been operational, the extent of the support and the enthusiasm by the players. There's something about gardening that is almost therapeutic, and we have with greenhouses and with solar units and so forth, we have all the capacity we need. We really just have to keep pushing that envelope forward to get more and more food produced
Great.
here.
Thank you very much, Mike. It's been a pleasure and enlightening for our viewers that you guys are behind the scenes making it better for Sault Ste. Marie.
Thanks,
That's
Andy.
wonderful.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And that's another edition of Civic Affairs. I'm Andy Martins. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.